how should one approach a Jupiter conjunct Uranus
Uranus.
new cycle? Because this is the beginning of a new synodic cycle, isn't it?
Right. It is. It is. And we're actually only in the last, what, if this is an interview in January, it's going to happen in April. We're in the last 4 months of approximately 13 plus years.
Could you explain to newcomers what
Oh,
a
yeah.
synodic cycle is?
Oh, yeah. That's when two planets come together and make a conjunction that are always on different orbits. This is the simplest way to explain it. And they all do it differently. I wrote a book about this a couple
Pushing
years
Through
ago. It
Time,
came
a
out.
wonderful
Pushing
book.
Through Time.
Yes.
Pushing Through Time, that you helped me with, actually. And it's like a clock. That's the best way to describe it. When the two planets come together, Jupiter and Uranus is pretty frequent. It's about every 13 or so years. But there's a lot slower ones, like the Saturn-Uranus conjunction, which is about every, I think that's 45 years. And so every time the more frequent ones happen with Jupiter, it is really neat if you've lived long enough to go back in your life and see what happened the last time it conjoined in a different part of your chart. And the last time Jupiter Uranus conjoined was at 0 degrees of Aries.
Right on the Aries axis. Wow.
On the Aries axis, right. And which is very interesting, because I just did a workshop on this, and I noticed that a lot of the violence that we've seen, a lot of the assault weapons, a lot of the issues with the school shootings. I actually did a workshop a couple of months ago for Connecticut, and this Jupiter Uranus at 0 Aries was pretty lit up when those things were happening. Okay. So we're finishing that cycle right now. We're moving into the Jupiter Uranus at 21-22 Taurus at the end of April of 2024. And what I've found in my research, the more positive side of this is that Uranus has to do with waking to one's soul's purpose. It's out of the box thinking, it's innovation. And it is classically, I feel, an innovation cycle. And so what I like to look at, and I'll be talking about this in the workshop on that Saturday that I'm doing this, is look at the houses, if you want to do the tracking. I mean, the time before the last one, which was at 0 Aries, was at 5, I think, in Aquarius, I think early degrees, like 5 degrees. So always look to see the houses that Jupiter rules in your chart, and always look at the houses that Uranus rules in your chart, because wherever the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is taking place is where you may see new ideas and new innovations, but you have to incorporate the houses that those planets rule to give a much fuller picture, a much more three-dimensional view. But we have 4 months to go before the old cycle is done. And so this is the balsamic phase of the cycle, which is the dying on the vine phase of the cycle.
The dark of the moon cycle, yes.
The dark of the moon cycle, like balsamic vinegar, which I always like to say, the best vinegar in the world, takes a while to ferment. So there's a lot of, what I noticed in my research in the book was there's a lot of fermentation that takes place during the balsamic phase. There's a lot of unrest and uneasiness as well, because Uranus is not exactly an easy planet.
And
but
don't ferment things in the dark. If you're fermenting something, aren't you putting it out of the light in a
yeah, you withdraw,
right?
And you ferment it. So a lot of people are in withdrawal mode right now as well in this fermentation cycle. And the thing that I do want to say, I'd like to say this about Uranus, because every time we talk about Uranus in astrological circles, more frequently, we will hear the word chaos, volatility, revolution, earthquakes, anything that's catastrophic that goes with Uranus.
Hive mind, right? Some people say hive mind, right?
Right, exactly. Right. But the thing about Uranus, it doesn't necessarily play out in a disastrous way if we're willing to let go of things, if we're willing to be open to change, if we're willing to
accept change,
to accept change without fighting the change. Because if you try to restrict Uranus energy, it'll just blow up in your face. And so I always tell people that's when the magic comes in. When you say, okay, I'm in a change mode. I'm a little chaotic right now. I'm not sleeping. There's been a lot of issues with people, with sleep. And that means that I need to pay attention to why I have all this anxiety. Uranus is an anxious energy planet. And the reason the anxiety is there is because there's something we're not addressing. There's something that we know we need to do to change, but we refuse. The good news about Jupiter is that it does guide us if we take a moment to listen. And I do think with the Jupiter Uranus being in late degrees of Taurus, in a wide sextile to Neptune, in a very wide sextile to Neptune, that there are moments if we take time away from the chaos that we're in right now and turn off the media, folks. By the way, turn off all the media, because Jupiter Uranus is overkill on the media. I mean, just overkill. If you can just turn it off for a few hours a day, you'll do a lot better than leaving it on 24/7. It doesn't help the Jupiter Uranus energy. So anyway, it is very innovative. And if you go back in your life and you go and see where was Jupiter Uranus at 0 Aries in my chart, what happened during that almost 14 years of my life? What happened 14 years before that when Jupiter Uranus was, I'm just remembering this off the top of my head, I think it was 5 Aquarius. What happened in your life if you're old enough to have gone through this? And you will see that there is a repeating pattern of change.